Hello, this is Tony Hiller from RealClimateScience.com. On May 31st, 1935, Woodward Ranch, Texas received 22 inches of rain in 2 hours and 45 minutes, which was a world record rainfall. It broke the previous world record, which was set a few hours earlier at two separate locations in Colorado. An astonishing 24 inches of rain fell in 6 hours at two locations in eastern Colorado on the afternoon and evening of May 30th, 1935. Almost 23 inches of rain fell in just 4 hours. During those 4 hours, more rain fell than normally falls in those locations during an entire year. This led to terrible flooding, including 250 dead in Nebraska, which was the worst flood in the state's history. May 1935 was also the coolest May of the last century in the United States. There are a lot of claims being made that extreme precipitation is due to warmer air caused by global warming, but history shows the exact opposite. Precipitation is frequently associated with cold fronts because colder air can't hold the moisture and the water precipitates out. It would make sense that the world's record rainfall occurred during the coldest May of the last century. So let's take a look at what else was going on in 1935. Burn acreage in the United States was one of the highest on record, about 3 times current levels. The United States had its most intense hurricane on record at Labor Day 1935, which killed hundreds of people in Florida. India recorded a temperature of 124 degrees, which was hotter than the recent 123 degrees, which the New York Times blamed on global warming. India also received 23 inches of rain in one day in 1935, which was a lot, but not as much as Colorado received. During May 1935, Queensland was having a disastrous drought which killed between 5 and 6 million sheep. During April 1935, the United States had their worst dust storms on record. The drought was so bad in the upper Midwest that the United States government relocated 1,500 farmers to Alaska. Drought and flooding in China caused tremendous suffering. Children were sold for a bowl of rice by desperate parents. That was occurring during October, and China was also having deadly flooding in July, 50,000 dead in Chinese floods. 2,000 square miles was underwater in one province, and there was also deadly flooding occurring elsewhere in China. At the start of 1935, Britain was having an unprecedented heat wave. Roses were blooming in Wales and daffodils in the south of England. On January 3, 1935, temperatures in London were only 4 degrees below that of June. During July 1935, there was deadly flooding in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Delaware. Around the time of the Colorado and Nebraska floods, there was also deadly flooding occurring in Mexico. Also in 1935, New Zealand was experiencing terrible drought. Many districts had no rain for 5 months. 1935 was a pretty rough year, with May being the coolest on record in the United States, and the previous year, 1934, was the warmest May on record. As of 1999, NASA showed 1934 as being the hottest year on record in the United States, more than half a degree Celsius warmer than 1998. This cooling after the 1930s wasn't convenient for politicians like Al Gore, who wanted to show warming, so shortly thereafter NASA altered the data to turn this cooling trend into a warming trend. 1934 used to be a lot warmer than 1998, but after NASA tampered with the data, 1934 became cooler. And it wasn't just the United States that was hot in 1934. The ice was dissolving at the poles, and scientists predicted sea level would rise 40 feet. Los Angeles Times reported on December 30th, 1934, whole world in freak weather year of 1934. Cold heat, drought, and floods set new marks. Unprecedented extremes recorded in every corner of the earth. Even the climate has changed in spots. The chief meteorologist of the U.S. Weather Bureau reported a worldwide drought. England was having the worst drought in a century. The drought was almost a universal disaster around the world. Crops were failing in Russia. 500,000 people were starving in China's drought. The New York Times reported that temperatures in China had stood between 115 and 120 degrees for several weeks. The Canberra Times reported that London was having the worst drought in 180 years. Antarctica was having a heat wave in June 1934. There was death and suffering over a wide area caused by the Chinese drought. Heat waves and bushfires in Australia. New York darkened by vast dust cloud. Heatwave and drought hit the farmers. High temperatures in Britain. Freak weather in the United States. The United States had its worst drought on record during 1934, with 80% of the country affected. A typhoon in Japan during September 1934 killed more than 3,000 people. Essentially everything we hear about the climate and energy from the press and politicians is a big lie. There isn't one shred of evidence to support the idea that the climate was better when carbon dioxide levels were lower. Henry Kissinger just turned 100 years old this week, and he explained what this is all about. Who controls the food supply controls the people. Who controls the energy can control whole continents. Who controls money can control the world. Toto has been pulling back the curtain on the climate scam for the past 15 years. You can visit him, Kyrie Caesar, Toki Upala, and the 4 new puppies on the web at realclimatescience.com.